This is Arvin Vora, founder of Vora Method and author of How to Get into an Ivy League College. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use Montage to create a high energy, exciting essay. Before we begin, I want to talk about the ways that humans communicate. The way we communicate is we always talk about what's interesting about a story right at the beginning. We don't necessarily begin a story right at the beginning of the chronological sequence of events. We start at the interesting points. For example, suppose that someone says like, wow, I saw a peacock at a restaurant sitting at the table like a human. Here's how they're going to start. I saw a peacock at a restaurant sitting at a table like a human. Because that's interesting and weird. It catches the listener's attention or the reader's attention. If somebody was lying, here's how they would tell the story. Yesterday, I was hungry. Thus, I put on my clothes and decided to go to a restaurant. At the restaurant, I sat down and I got a menu. I happened to glance over to the left where I saw a peacock sitting. No. That's not how humans communicate. We talk about what's exciting first. Here's another principle. We always start with the event that implies the other events. So if you saw a peacock at a restaurant, we already know that you were at some previous point hungry, that you left your house, that you got to the restaurant. So you don't need to say all that. We as humans know what would have happened before getting to the restaurant. We understand what restaurants are for, why people go there, and the steps that you need to take before you get there. We know that you didn't just show up naked to the restaurant. We know that you got dressed, you left your house, and somehow got yourself over there. None of that really matters. The exciting part is the peacock at the restaurant. Now, the same thing is going to be true over here as we explore this idea of montage. Now, what do we do with montage? Montage means we're going to take a whole bunch of different events, compress them to create something exciting. We already discussed this in the compression section. Montage is just taking the principle of compression to the next level. Let's take a look at this sample bit that I wrote. And this is the way, in this situation, I'm pretending to be a student who's pretending to be interested in ancient tools. It's not a bad idea. There's a lot you could do with that. But let's look at what happens over here. First, I went to the library. I took out books on ancient tools. I read several of those books. One book I especially liked was Tools of the Ancient World. I placed it on my bookshelf and referred to it when I needed to. I mean, this is just terrible. I mean, there's something good about it, that is showing somebody's curious and interested on their own. They're going to the library on their own. That's all great. But aside from them, this is just stating, like, people understand how a library works. Remember, the person who's reading your essay is a graduate from the college that you're applying to. Most Harvard graduates presumably understand the basics of how a library functions. Let's go to the next paragraph. Next, I started experimenting on my own. I got a sharp rock from the yard and saw if I could use it to chip another rock. At first, this yielded few results. Over time, I got better at it. So it has some good things. It shows that the person is curious, willing to experiment. It shows perseverance. The person keeps trying. But it's just so draggy and plodding. It's taking way too much space to cover this simple idea. All right, let's go to the next paragraph. I also visited 2 separate museums to learn about ancient tools. I had been to them during childhood, but I had not read the description plaques carefully. I read them while I was at the museums and learned more information about the tools. For example, I learned that tools could be made of bone. This is just terrible. I mean, this is unbelievably bad. And what's wrong with it? It's just, again, stating too much information. Instead of having all this stuff like this, just focus on the information that implies the rest. If you take a look at this, in order to read a description plaque at a museum, you have to have gone to the museum. I mean, you don't have to have all this stuff spelled out so explicitly like you're trying to explain it to a robot that doesn't get just how basic people function. Now, how can we fix this? These are all good things. Like, look, it has all the different parts, right? Somebody's becoming curious by looking at books. They're experimenting on their own. They're finding information in kind of an unexpected way. The stuff is good. This presentation is terrible. So let's compress it. And when you compress it, what's going to happen? It should look more intelligent. It should seem more sophisticated. And it should seem higher energy and more exciting. Listen, if you want to show passion, your writing needs to be high energy, not like low energy. Otherwise, you sound like, I am very passionate about ancient tools. No, it's got to be exciting. Get excited in your writing, and here's how that's going to look. During the next months, I filled my room with library books on ancient tools, tried 1,000 different ways to make my own tools with stones from the backyard, and actually read the plaques in the Ancient History Museum downtown. I read Tools of the Ancient World so many times that I had the diagrams memorized. We get all the key points across and we compress it down. Now notice I put it into one paragraph. It's a single high energy paragraph. If you compare the difference between prose and poetry, poetry basically usually takes what would be 5 paragraphs in prose and compresses it into 2 or 3 words. That's what makes it powerful. And that's what you want to do with the montage. What would be 5 or 6 or 10 paragraphs, compress it into a sentence or a couple sentences. Now you might say, well, wouldn't I need to write like 5,000 words to get 500 words? Yes, you will. We're going to take all that straw and compress it into gold. We're going to take that coal and compress it down into a diamond. So you're going to need a lot of coal for a little bit of diamond. That's how we're going to do this. Here's another example. In this situation, I'm pretending to be a student who's pretending to be interested in psychology. You might be actually interested in psychology, but here's what student writing often looks like at the beginning. First, I read Introduction to Psychology. Later, I wanted to see how psychology began, so I read some of Freud's works. Later, I read controversial articles and books about psychology, including Snyder's The Mythophobias. I also watched YouTube videos on psychology. All right, so it has some good points, that it's showing that you're curious on your own, but it's just drag. I mean, why mention something like Introduction to Psychology? That's boring. Why does that even need to be there? Mentioning Freud's works, all right, yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, but like just dragging it out in this terrible, dragged out way is just unbearable. So what are we going to do? We're going to compress it. And when you compress it, it's going to sound smarter, more sophisticated, and higher energy. I spent evenings online debating interpretations of Freud's theories or defending Snyder's The Mythophobia. This shows much more passion. Why? Because in order to debate the interpretations, you have to have read the theories, you have to care about the theories. It implies all the rest. So you don't have to stay all that stuff happened. You can just focus on that thing. To get to the point where you're debating online, you must already care. Or defending Snyder's The Mythophobia, if you're defending it, it's probably controversial. So you can get that information across. Remember, don't think of your reader as an idiot. If you treat your reader as someone who can figure things out, read between the lines, and understand basic human context, they're going to assume that you are the type of person that can be quick-witted, read between the lines, and understand human context. If you treat them like they're smart, they're going to assume that you're smart. It's okay to make your reader think a little bit. The goal is not to bewilder the reader and confuse the reader, but it's okay to assume that the reader has his or her brain actually on. The key principle in montage is you have to focus on the event that implies the rest. Let's look at this ridiculous paragraph. Fred put on his underwear. Then he put on his socks. Then he put on his pants. Then he put on his shirt. Then he put on a tie. Then he left the house. I mean, this is just terrible. I mean, it's all unnecessary. But you're like, well, how would I get all that information across? Well, you can do it by just focusing on what implies the rest. What thing would imply the rest? Putting on the tie. That's the thing, right? Now, you might say, well, you could theoretically put on a tie and be totally naked. And you're right, you could. And that's the exceptional case. So in that case, you would have to specify. You would have to say Fred didn't put on any socks, and he didn't put on underwear, he didn't put on a shirt, and he didn't put on pants. He just put on a tie. You have to specify when it's something unusual. So going out with nothing but a tie is unusual. But wearing a pants and shirt and socks and underwear and then a tie, that's not unusual. Here's how we can fix it. Fred tightened his tie on the way out the door. With this paragraph, with this one sentence, we've gotten all the information in that other thing. If he was naked, that would need to be specified. Since it is not specified, the normal sane reader is going to assume that he got dressed with the rest of his clothes before he put on his tie. You don't need to specify things like as if you're writing to a computer. Computers aren't reading this. People are people who have the same life understanding that you do. Montage allows you to really compress something to create something that's high energy, exciting, and dynamic. It's also going to look sophisticated and intelligent which is going to make you seem sophisticated and intelligent. It's going to give you a much stronger essay. Now, the catch is you're often going to have to write a lot more to compress that coal into diamonds, and that's fine. That's good. It's just part of this. So if you're looking at your writing and you see it's dragging and just being tedious and boring and all that, see if you can compress a lot of events into a single short montage to give your essay that excitement, that dynamism, that sophistication that's going to help it stand out.